a very warm welcome. You're watching the Wire Wrap. I'm Shravasti Dasgupta. We're just about a week away from the Lok Sabha elections kicking off on April 19th, where we will see the first phase of polling begin across 6 states, 2 union territories. About 102 seats will be going to the polls. So to discuss what's at stake, what are the issues, today joining me are Siddharth Vardarajan, founding editor at The Wire, and Nilanjan Sarkar, senior fellow at the Center for Policy Research. Before we get into the first phase and the seats as well as what's really at stake over there, in a sense, the fact that elections are truly upon us is an indicator from the fact that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has started talking about the ongoing ethnic violence in Manipur. Earlier this week, in an interview with the Assam Tribune, Modi said that because of timely intervention by his government, the situation in Manipur has significantly improved. Siddharth, how do you see this? An election speech in the sense that he's finally speaking about the situation in Manipur almost 11 months after the violence started?
I think it was a dreadful, insensitive comment. Of course, it's inaccurate and a blatant lie. But the fact that Mr. Modi goes to the Northeast, gives an interview to Assam Tribune, he still hasn't gone to Manipur. He still hasn't, other than, I would say, a rather tangential reference to the violence in Manipur in the context of that incident of sexual violence. He hasn't addressed the issue there. He may say that he deputed, like he said, we've sent our senior people there, right? By which he means Amit Shah. Amit Shah hasn't managed to pacify or stabilize the situation at all. Today you have more than 260 people killed. Number displaced is enormous. But the bottom line is that the state is virtually divided into two. And the levels of shall we say, suspicion, the level of fear and insecurity of both the Meitei and the tribal population is just out of control. It's no better than it was a year ago. So for Mr. Modi to speak of timely intervention when there's been zero intervention. If anything, I would say, considering that Biren Singh is Bharatiya Janata Party, the state government has been partisan. So its intervention has actually fueled things. It's made things much worse. And if you see the grip of Meitei extremist or sort of chauvinist organizations on the BJP, on the government, you can understand what's happening there now. So I think that it's very, very unfortunate that the Prime Minister tries to make light of a tragedy. I think this is a singular tragedy that defines the nature of Mr. Modi's rule over the last 5 years, which is that you simply do not bother to address issues of law and order if it's going to show you in bad light. You do not bother to address the fear and insecurity that minorities have, regardless of whether they are Muslim or Christian or whatever. This is what Mr. Modi's governance is all about. And I think that Manipur is a textbook case, and it doesn't surprise me that he's lying. But what upset me as a journalist was to have the Assam Tribune run this comment of Mr. Modi without any context, without any counter, without, normally in an interview, you expect that if the person you're interviewing says something completely incorrect or makes a blatant misrepresentation of fact, the journalist should at least say, hang on a minute, how can you say it's out of control when XYZ, 260 people have, how can you say you control things in a timely fashion when so many people died, when the state is still divided? There was no counter, which means that this interview also was probably a scripted interview, which are precisely the kind of interviews that he gives. So I think it's sad that even in the Northeast, major publications are lending themselves to Mr. Modi's narrative building, but I think people themselves are not going to be fooled by this.
Yeah, and that's not the only interview that has come out of Modi in the recent week. We've seen another interview that's come out in Newsweek where it's also a similar of a similar nature in the sense that it feels like a long press release where there are no counter questions that are asked in any way. But I want to get you in on this, Nilanjan. The fact that Modi, of course, as Siddharth was mentioning, he's not visited the state. He's only spoken about it once. That to outside Parliament 79 days after the violence started. Then he was forced to speak inside Parliament when a no confidence motion was moved against his government. Now, just a week ahead of elections, one of the seats in Manipur is going to vote on April 19. Even though the state has 2 seats only, it's voting in 2 phases. If that's not an indicator of the situation over there, I don't know what is. But how do you see this violence playing out in the electoral process? A lot of people will be voting from relief camps. The Election Commission itself has also said that. A big factor, would you say, in this election?
I mean, it will be a factor. I think that, as Siddharth said, I mean, the BJP is aligned with one ethnic group in Manipur, essentially. And so, insofar as the voters do not represent that ethnic group, it's probably not going to cut for the BJP. And if the voters are from that ethnic group, then perhaps it will cut for the BJP. I mean, I think the more sort of interesting question which you bring up here is that, is this a more general strategy when you have a crisis-like situation? I think in some sense, the closest analog to what we're seeing with the response to Manipur is the response to COVID, right? When things were at their worst, it was radio silence. And when things sort of quieted down, that's when we sort of started seeing some kind of credit claiming. There seems to be a fairly intentional branding strategy that when things are really bad, when we're seeing horrible images, in front of us in the camera, you cannot have those images and the Prime Minister side by side. Once either the issue sort of dies down, or a larger media strategy is discovered within the party, then we can start thinking about how to bring the Prime Minister in to make certain comments and certain kinds of credit claiming. So I very much see it from that lens. I think the operative factor, unfortunately, for the BJP is what you said in the first, which is it's just 2 seats. I don't think that they're going to move mountains to figure out Manipur for 2 seats. I think it is just an exercise in image management to make sure that the Prime Minister's image does not show up side by side with the images of the ugliest violence that we saw in Manipur.
All right, we'll keep our eye on those developments in Manipur. As Siddharth mentioned, over 200 people have died, and according to the Election Commission's own figures, 25,000 people will be voting from relief camps, and we don't know what will happen to the 9,000 people who have fled to Mizoram and how they will be able to vote. We do not know that, but Manipur will be voting in 2 phases on April 19 and April 26, and we'll keep our eye on those developments. But another key development that's happened over the last week is the fact that the CSDS has come out with a survey, a pre-poll survey, in which they have conducted interviews with about 10,000 randomly selected voters, and has found that unemployment and price rise are the biggest issues for these people who were surveyed upon, and other issues like Ram Temple and has not found as much resonance. Just to give our viewers a sense of what this survey has found, 62% has said finding a job is more difficult now compared to the past, and 27% have also mentioned it as an important issue for 2024. 55% have expressed the view that corruption has increased. 32% believe that development in India has been only for rich Indians. Siddharth, how do you see the findings of this survey, and what are the big takeaways for you?
The findings don't surprise me because they are in sync with realistic statistical data which has come to the surface despite the government trying to present a doctored version of what's happening on the sort of economy front and jobs front and so on. The government has made all kinds of tall claims. For example, misinterpreting the Provident Fund sign-up data to make a claim that 40 million jobs have been created over the last 10 years and so on and so forth. As recently as perhaps 10 or 12 days ago, Anurag Thakur, the information minister, responded to the Institute of Human Development study on the very severe jobs crisis India is facing by citing this kind of PF data and all these statistics which have been debunked. So if a survey of this kind done by CSDS-Lokniti, credible polling agency, finds that employment, job insecurity, price rise, concerns about the fact that the government's policies all favor the rich, this is top of the mind, doesn't surprise me. I would, however, caution against too speedy a judgment in translating this perception into some kind of sense of how people are going to vote. The same survey, I think, in response to a question about do you blame the central government or the state government, many of them held the state government to be responsible. This is bad news in double-engine sarkar places, because then you're blaming BJP, whether it's the state or the central government, and you may want to vote against Modi in the Lok Sabha election. But you may equally vote against the Congress in Punjab, or you may vote against the Congress in Karnataka, although they haven't been in power all that long. So we don't know finally how this will translate into votes. But I think it as a significant comment on the true picture of the Indian economy. It's something that we all need to take note of. And it's something that I think even foreign media, which still to this day is somewhat enamored by Mr. Modi's, the fact that he's growing the economy at a very fast pace and so on. This is an important reality check, that on the ground, actually, people's perceptions of what's happening is vastly different from the government's tall claims.
I think the important point that you're mentioning is the fact that we don't know how this is going to translate into votes, and this is something we saw during the assembly elections in December as well. A lot of people on the ground talking about unemployment and price rise as big issues, but did that make a lot of difference in how they voted? Perhaps not. So how do you see these survey findings, Nilanjan, and how does that translate for you?
So look, I mean, I have, as both of you know, I've been running surveys in India for the last 10, 15 years. The number one issue you always get is unemployment. Number two issue you always get is inflation. Sometimes they switch sides. I mean, in some sense, irrespective of which government, which party, so on and so forth, these are, if you look back in 2014, you look in 2019, you will see these, and corruption is also sort of, increasingly becoming important. So what I would say is to put these numbers in context. Don't trust the percentage value, right? So it's 27%. I think when we go on the ground, we do see that the data that CSDS is picking up has some face validity. There is a lot of economic distress on the ground, right? Who to blame, how to blame, that is a very, very difficult question, right? But we know there's agricultural distress. We know that the employment situation isn't rosy. We know that no matter where you are, no matter which party you support, big money politics is a thing. Electoral bonds have, of course, been made public, but the average person sees a growing big corporate and politician nexus, particularly with the ruling party at the center. And that is something that everybody sees, whether or not they know how to respond to a survey, because if you run surveys for a long time, you know how to move the percentages up another 5% or down 5%. That, I would say, sort of reserve judgment on. The reason why I sort of bring this up is that I do think that CSDS is picking up some understanding of economic distress that the citizen picks up. I wouldn't say things like, oh, well, if 27% of the people feel like it's the most important issue, that 70% of the people don't. It might actually be 50, 60% of the people who believe that unemployment is an issue, but they just don't know how to verbalize it in a survey-like setting. But I think this brings me to the other point and the question that you asked, which is, does it translate to voting? See, I think what we're seeing today in India is something that is far more disconcerting than, what are the issues and who will this person vote for, that person vote for. If you are somebody, particularly from the economic distress standpoint, who has a grievance about what is happening in society, do you believe your optimal route is to go to parliament or to go to your representative? Today, if you were a farmer in the last few years, do you think that it would have been easier for you to go to the political opposition and get your demands heard, or to take to the streets? So I think part of the reason why we're not seeing the translation into votes is that there is, in the minds of the average citizen, an increasing disjuncture between formal parliamentary politics and the things that matter to them.
But the kind of, I think, just building on what you're saying, is that what we have also seen in this survey is that if we go by the findings, 48% have said that development has been for everyone. So an indication of the BJP's own narrative that sabka saath, sabka vikas. So and that's what they're trying to build up in the campaign process as well. They're talking about development, they're talking about India's international image, Ram Temple, which are emotive issues which are kind of resonating with the public, and they are voting for these things. So the survey kind of capturing that as well?
It's interesting that in the second phase of the survey, I think the data published by the Hindu today speaks about people's idea of India Is it a country that is mainly for Hindus, or does it belong to everybody? A very, very low percentage of people favor the idea that India is a country for Hindus. The vast majority say that India belongs to everybody. And I think that's a major rejection of the BJP's ideopolitical stance. It's a major rejection of even the key campaign thread that we've seen in Mr. Modi's presentation so far, right? Where he is sort of harping. I've seen 3 or 4 of his speeches where he's emphasizing that he's a good Hindu, the voters are Hindu, Congress is pro-Muslim. So voters seem to be, at least those surveyed by the CSDS-Lokniti guys, seem to indicate that they think India belongs to everybody. It's not just a Hindu country. At the same time, I think 22% felt that it was a good thing that what Mr. Modi did with the temple, right? So there's no doubt a reasonably strong constituency that favors that sees or sets great value by some of Mr. Modi's Hindutva sort of agenda pushing. I did note, however, that the 22% figure excuse me, is not very different from the historic vote share of the BJP under Mr. Vajpayee, for example. That's your core BJP voter. So it doesn't surprise me that for a good 20-25% of the population, Ram Temple is key. They backed the BJP on that basis all these years. But I do feel that the menu, the kind of issues that people believe are important are really quite different from that of the BJP. And the fact that in the BJP's own electoral propaganda now, side by side with Sabka Saath and so on, there's a marked push on trying to paint the opposition as corrupt, trying to paint the Congress as so-called pro-Muslim, trying to present Mr. Modi as being this great Hindu leader. There is a sense in which the BJP knows that its message of Sabka Saath is either not credible or is not being believed by as large a number of people as it would like to if it wants to fulfill Mr. Modi's dream of 370 seats, which is not going to happen.
Yeah, since you're mentioning the target of 370 seats, let's get into the phase 1 of polling that's going to start next week on April 19, and we're going to see this is going to be the biggest phase of the 7 phases that are going to the polls, and about 102 seats across 6 states and 2 union territories, including 3 in the northeast, Arunachal, Mizoram and Meghalaya, Tamil Nadu, Puducherry, Andaman and Nicobar Islands will all be going to the polls. And apart from these states and union territories, the other states where elections will also take place in the first phase is Assam, Bihar, Jammu and Kashmir, Chhattisgarh, Lakshadweep, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Uttarakhand, West Bengal and Western Uttar Pradesh, which is a key area for the BJP. Nilanjan, what are the big battleground areas here that are likely to see hot contests in this first phase?
So, I think any place in which the regional party is still strong, West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, you are likely to see contests for the simple reason that this is the only places where the BJP machinery won't simply be able to out-resource the opposition. Right? I think there's been a lot of discussion about Tamil Nadu. Yeah. And, the way that I see that, and there's, Tamil Nadu is sort of a very interesting case for us, right? Because if we were to look back 5 years ago, the Modi effect in elections across states looked to be huge. The one exception was Tamil Nadu, right? Tamil Nadu looked like a state that there wasn't really much of a Modi factor, and in fact, even in alliance, the BJP was only able to get 1 seat. I mean, not the BJP, in fact, right? So the NDA did not do very well in Tamil Nadu. This time, the BJP is going it alone, and there's a question about if you need sort of large, sort of double-digit vote share for the BJP, irrespective of how many seats they win. How popular has Modi become? Has he become popular? Is there a Modi factor in Tamil Nadu? Right? These are sort of big open questions. I think a good sort of analogous case is that all of a sudden in 2014, in West Bengal, where the BJP had never been a factor, it got 17% of the vote and won 2 seats. Right? If the BJP is able to get that kind of performance, sort of 10 to 15 percentage points, 1 or 2 seats, or even 1 seat, that would be a huge benefit. If it's winning 1 seat on the basis of a local leader like Annamalai, I don't think that is a major victory for the BJP.
Siddharth, you want to comment on this for Tamil Nadu? Of course, it's crucial for the BJP's 400 target that Modi has set for the NDA. And in a sense, it's gone back to its old playbook of nationalism with the whole Kachativu issue. But also, the state is very key for the BJP this time to make inroads. The last two elections we saw, it's not been able to do much. How do you see things playing out over there?
I think the fact that the BJP is going it alone, essentially, right? ADMK is fighting separately. Makes the task that much more difficult. In a seat like Coimbatore, for example, where Annamalai is trying to take on the take on the UPA, the DMK-led alliance. In the 2019 election, the alliance gave that seat to the CPM, which won it comfortably against the BJP, although the BJP polled around 30% with the backing of the ADMK, right? In this election, the DMK is fighting it by itself, which is a measure of their sense of how much of a threat Annamalai perhaps is posing this time, that they felt that in this kind of a seat it's better if the DMK fights directly. But the fact that the ADMK isn't there means that I think DMK ought to win and they have a strong candidate. Kanyakumari is the other seat which the BJP is looking at. Mr. Modi has devoted an inordinate amount of political time and space to winning Tamil Nadu. Cast your mind back to the inauguration of the new parliament, right, when he had this whole drama with the Senghol, right? And you know, it was a kind of blatant attempt to woo Tamil Nadu. Of course, I think the caste elements perhaps are not going to work for him because it's a Brahminical ritual, right? And you're telling a state which has rejected Brahmanism and Brahminical dominance and is quite happy to have done so, that we are going to revive these kinds of things, right? So I'm not sure that he fully gets it. Yes, there will be a section of the electorate that is firmly behind him. We've seen that in some of the roadshows, but not others. So, you know, net, I'd be still surprised if Mr. Modi is able to accomplish for the BJP what he did in West Bengal in 2014. And 2019, to dur ki baat hai. Rombuduram, it's not going to happen, right? And similarly, Kerala is where they're setting a lot of, you know, hope in trying to win a couple of seats. I think this time too, it's going to be difficult for them, which means this Project 370, Project 400, it's really it's part of Modi's psyops, right? To kind of project this idea of extreme confidence so that everybody's unnerved. The opposition, officials, judges, the media, that section of the media which is still somewhat skeptical and remains independent. You know, Mr. Modi has picked that kind of a number in order to, you know, and all this talk of telling bureaucrats, let's plan 100 days, and he tells the RBI, you know, get ready for doing a lot of hard work for my third term. I mean, frankly, all of these pronouncements ought to be red flagged by or red carded by the Election Commission, because these are questionable pronouncements given that you have a model code of conduct that doesn't allow you to engage in policy discussion and policy decisions and so on. But I think that this phase it's interesting. Kashmir, you know, the first time that people are going to actually vote in the erstwhile state of Jammu Kashmir since they had statehood stripped away from them, special status stripped away. And the BJP is hoping to, at least in the Jammu region, do better than, or to repeat its performance last time. I think it's going to be uphill everywhere for them, quite frankly.
Yeah, so Jammu and Kashmir, Udhampur is going to be polling on April 19th, but also the fact that the BJP is looking at an uphill task, perhaps not so much in the other key battleground state in this phase, which is West Bengal. Northern Bengal is going to be going to the polls, and we are going to see polling in Kuch Bihar, Alipurduar as well as Jalpaiguri. All three seats already with the BJP, but the BJP is obviously looking to retain that. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think as of right now, I mean, here's the way I think about it. If they're losing some of these seats, then the BJP probably definitely drops below 10 seats, maybe even drops below 5 seats out of the 42. I mean, these are seats that the BJP really should be winning. Kuch Bihar, I think, is out of these perhaps the most competitive, but, you know, still not incredibly competitive, shouldn't be. The reason why, I would just sort of make two very quick observations about West Bengal. I think Modi remains popular. The BJP has actually become more of a standard force over the last 5 years in the state, but organizationally it's very weak. So it's unclear sort of how that all cuts, right? Is it a situation where the BJP is able to up its tally from 18 seats, or does this sheer organizational weakness sort of get in its way? The second thing, and a lot of people in Bengal claim that there is some sort of nod and wink with the ECI here. The way the phases work in West Bengal is you start with the safest seats for the BJP and you move towards the least safe seats, for the hardest seats for the BJP to win. So we'll really start understanding what's happening in West Bengal when we get to about phase 3. Once you start getting into like Murshidabad, Nadia, some of these seats were 50-50 seats, and then we'll start getting a better sense of sort of how the BJP is going to perform. So I would say this is just a gut check for the BJP. If they come back and say, look, these were very tough fights, or we may even have lost one of the seats, then it's a very, very bad sign for the BJP in West Bengal. If it wins relatively comfortably, which I think many people are expecting, then we still have to see until about phase 3.
Yeah. If I can just leap in on a couple of other factors with Bengal, I think that we don't know. I think there's a tension between how the Sandesh Khali issue is going to play out, where clearly the Trinamool Congress is on the back foot, having been party to this kind of violence against women, and acting only when there was public outrage and legal pressure and so on and so forth. So there is that sense of anger against Mamta. If, however, the voting this time is being polarized on the basis of are you for Mamta or against her, the fact that you have a three-way contest, right? The fact that the left and the Congress are not with Mamta means that the anti-Mamta voter has a choice, which perhaps, and given that the left today is slightly stronger in West Bengal than it was in 2019, when in fact the bulk of left votes, people say, shifted to the BJP, right? If you at least look at vote shares, right? So if the left is looking at some kind of a vote share revival, could this actually then produce a counterintuitive result, that you have anger against Mamta because of Sandesh Khali, and the BJP is helping to project that by targeting her and pitting Modi against Mamta and so on. But this may actually, by making Mamta the kind of polarizing center of the election in a three-way fight, it may have unpredictable results. On the other hand, the electorate may decide that no, we just go with Modi, strongest bet. The BJP is certainly looking to, it was 18-22 last time, right? And I think they're certainly looking at the very least to reverse that, to make it 22-18, if not more. Yeah. And I know that there are sections within the Trinamool who fear such an outcome, but it's early days yet. Campaign is underway now, and as Nilanjan said, the way in which the phases are structured has been designed to give a boost to the BJP, but actually, how it plays out, we don't know.
Yeah, I would say quickly on Sandesh Khali, I think the BJP kind of messed up playing its strongest hand, because it started making it a Hindu-Muslim issue, and it actually ended up causing problems because it was not a Hindu-Muslim issue, it was a TMC issue. Yeah. And had it just simply been saying this is how TMC is, this is how BJP is, and probably the BJP could have gained a lot more mileage out of it. But let's see.
But then the BJP is trying to capitalize a lot on the whole issue. They've the candidate from Sandesh Khali is a woman who was a victim herself, and the Prime Minister has spoken to her on the phone. That has been televised. The BJP in all its campaigns in Bengal is making the biggest issue about Sandesh Khali, while the TMC is making it more about Mamta's policies and whether you want her policies or the BJP's. But it's, as they mentioned, that it's 7 phases in West Bengal. A lot can happen over the course of the next 2 months. We'll just have to see. But the other state that I do want to discuss a little bit is, of course, Western Uttar Pradesh, which will be voting in this phase as well. And some key seats here: Saharanpur, Kairana, Muzaffarnagar, Bijnor, Nagina, Moradabad, Rampur and Pilibhit. A few changes here in comparison to 2019, while the SP and the Congress alliance is the main challenger to the BJP this year. In 2019, it was SP, BSP and the RLD that was together, but all these areas have a significant Muslim population as well. But a recent report by our colleague Omar has shown that the opposition alliance has has put up candidates that are upper caste Hindu candidates in this area. So How do you see this whole fight kind of coming across in Western Uttar Pradesh, which is also set to kind of set the narrative for how UP will vote across the 7 phases?
Yeah. I think the BJP, the fact that the BJP was keen to get the RLD over suggests that they approached this election with some sense of nervousness about the terrain here, right? There's the farmers issue.
Yeah, it's the sugarcane belt.
Exactly, right? So I think that the BJP entered the fight with a sense that it was handicapped in some way, has brought Jayant Chaudhary to sort of boost itself. But my sense is that the fight is still going to be a fairly tough one. I think it's not a cakewalk for the BJP by any stretch. In fact, if you look at UP as a whole, received wisdom. I mean, the conventional wisdom is that, well, the BJP is going to improve its performance. Why? Because the last time you had SP, BSP in alliance, they managed to bring the BJP down to what, 62 or 63? Loss of 10 compared to 2014, and that this time the BJP, because it has better alliances, and because SP, BSP are not together, SP is instead together with the Congress, and the Congress seems to be, they can't even decide about Rai Bareli and Amethi. Yeah. You know, the BJP's tally is going to go up. This is what the BJP is counting on. But I do feel that some of the grassroots issues, CSDS poll has picked up on them. I think that you will have a kind of somewhat unpredictable outcome. And I think West UP is one area where I do believe, given public disaffection with a lot of Mr. Modi's policies, that you may have some surprises.
Yeah, the CSDS survey crucially also said that the farmers' protest had overwhelming support among those who were surveyed. And what is the sense that you're kind of getting from these seats in Western Uttar Pradesh for the BJP going forward and for the opposition alliance?
So I think, look, here's one way of seeing the calculation. With the BSP becoming a weakening force, the BJP believes, and there are numbers to back this up, that a significant proportion of the Dalit voters may start shifting towards the BJP, because a lot of them may not want to vote with the Samajwadi Party, right? Part of the challenge of that alliance. So a lot of the mechanics in Western UP, I think it is imagined that if an old alliance between the Jat community and the Muslim community revives, then the BJP is in a lot of trouble, right? That's the sort of the internal question. Now, the Jat community has also been facing its own transition, where I think a lot of the older members of the Jat community remember this old sort of alliance. A lot of the younger Jats are sort of BJP-ish. They've become, you know, sort of radicalized in a particular way. And so there's been this sort of divided house. I think the fear that the BJP saw is that something like the farmers' movement or a very strong sort of Jat mobilization that can also bring Muslims along would basically be the death knell for their chances in Western UP. So the reason to bring RLD along is to make sure it stays as a divided house. Who is going to be that leader? Tiket seems to have kind of disappeared. If it's not going to be Jayant Chaudhary, if the Jats don't have a strong leader emerge to sort of create one strong Jat coalition, do we divide the vote enough? Or do we create enough of sort of a weakened sentiment that we can sort of sail through these seats? I think one thing I would just very quickly say, with SP and Congress joining together in Western UP, I think there's less of a, and the BSP's recent politics, there's less of a concern of the Muslim vote dividing in Western UP. And so that does actually fundamentally shift many of those seats, even the seats that you mentioned.
Okay, so we'll keep an eye on that. But before we wrap up, we want to discuss something very quickly. The fact that in the last week we have seen some interesting developments, in that the BJP's Mandi candidate, Mandi in Himachal Pradesh candidate, actor Kangana Ranaut, has made an interesting comment on India's first Prime Minister when she referred to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. And the other development that took place was that Doordarshan has televised the Kerala Story, the movie which was very controversially released, received even by critics for distortion of facts. But these two instances in the last week, do you see alternate history and distortion of facts uniquely becoming a part of election campaigning in 2024?
I was amused to see that interview, and I think even Navika, who was interviewing her, was kind of constrained to kind of correct her, and then she stuck to her guns and has subsequently been defiant because she has cited the fact that, you know, Netaji was sworn in as Prime Minister in Singapore. Of course, his family has issued a statement saying, please don't confuse these. And somebody else has done a story on how actually Barkatullah even before Netaji had his provisional government, you had a provisional government by leftists. So you know, I think that you know, sheer fantasy world that these people occupy, and that they fabricate things. I mean, even her comments about criticizing those who actually fought for freedom. She says they were sitting at home watching TV. There was no TV in 45, 46, right? So it's just, you know, just utter rubbish. And but clearly, Mr. Modi sees a weaponized, communalized, dehistoricized Bollywood as a force multiplier for the BJP's politics, right? So, even the fielding of Kangana Ranaut from Himachal, or the insistence on telecasting this movie, Kerala Story, or the government's patronage of all kinds of other stories which are deeply problematic. There is the Kashmir Files, of course, which they went out of the way to promote, but also, and which the Israeli film director called as one of the most horrible propaganda films, and they were really shocked by that at the film festival. But then there's the film on JNU, there's a film on Bastar. Yeah. So there's a clear attempt to not just fabricate a kind of mythic past in which you can demonize all those who are in the opposition today and somehow project an alternative reality, but also to misrepresent the present through movies. And so she's very much part of that, and Kerala Story is part of that. So it doesn't surprise me that they're doing it, but I think that I just hope people are smart than to fall for this kind of stuff.
Nilanjan, your last comments on this: elections are no longer just fought by candidates and campaigns on the streets. It's also everywhere in social media, and candidates making all kinds of statements and a public discussion generating out of that. Your last comments on this?
No, so, you know, what does it mean for a party's strategy to put people like Kangana Ranaut in places where the BJP has done very well? These are 60% plus, you know, sort of vote shares 5 years ago, or putting a Pragya Thakur from Bhopal. I mean, if I ran from Bhopal, I would win on the BJP ticket, right? It doesn't matter, right? I mean, so it signals that we want these people to continue to formally represent us, even in a parliamentary capacity. You know, the question about re-envisioning history, I mean, it's kind of an interesting problem for the BJP, because it doesn't actually exist in the, right? It is, you have to invent the whole thing. It's not about correcting history or changing history. It is to invent an entire past from which we can draw ourselves. When we say an alternate history, the alternate history has to be created from the root. And so that's part of the reason why this is being done. I would say that it might have certain populist appeal. I mean, if, you know, right-wing populist appeal and so on. We see this happening in other countries. What history teaches us is that these kinds of alternate histories have little to no staying power. That unless they can actually get credible historians to create alternate histories, there's not much staying power. This is a flash in the pan. Right now the BJP is popular. Right now this kind of politics is popular. If and when the pendulum shifts, this will all be washed away.
All right. So we'll see if the discerning voter is able to make a decision on the basis of where the misinformation is, where the information is, what is being propagated, and what is the actual fact. And we'll keep our eyes on all those developments. Thank you so much, Siddharth and Nilanjan, for joining us on the Wire app. And thank you to our viewers for watching.